keep it classy here. Hope you all had a nice holiday. Mine went a little smoother than expected, but the amount of whiskey that was consumed may have helped with that. Anyway, I decided to make up this review on the RTX 3080 that I had picked up just before Christmas. I'm trying to decide on a good way of doing reviews that's a little bit different than everyone else. Because if I did reviews the same as everyone else, then why watch this channel? So I'm gonna give this a shot, see how it goes. Feel free to give me suggestions. Let me know if there's anything else I should try or you think would be good. So my thinking is, when it comes to video cards, is there's so many different models that come with pre-overclocks on them, with different ranges, and obviously they're Silicon Lottery. Some will overclock more than others. So if you're going to compare a specific architecture versus another, or say an RTX 3080 versus a 3070 and so on, but just being me and having to buy these cards and not getting reference ones, how do you keep it fair when you have one that's pre-overclocked, one that's not, or one that's highly overclocked, one that's not? So my thinking is, aim for an overclock that all cards of that model should be able to achieve. I would call it a 90% overclock. Something that doesn't take a lot of effort and work for someone to do, especially you're just your average gamer that might open Afterburner and want to move a few sliders in 5 minutes and be done. That kind of thing. So all of my testing, that's pretty much what I did. I just went for around 100 to 150 megahertz over stock on the core, and then would look at the type of memory and the brand, if it's Samsung, Micron, etc., and look up what average memory overclocks were for those cards, and then kind of knocked it down just a little bit to play it safe. So pretty much each card should get about 10-ish% performance over a stock reference model. I'm also, for the fan, and what I like to do is I will set the fan as high as I can before I'm able to hear it from where I sit, and then I'll just knock it down 1% or 2% so that it blends in with the rest of the fans of the system and is essentially inaudible. Without professional tools for measuring decibel levels and all that, figure that's the best way to have an even balance for fan settings. And then I'll max out the power limit bar, and then like I said, just apply, depending on the card, 100 to 150 more on the core. Memory around 500 megahertz, give or take. Again, it depends on the brand of the memory and so on, but I'm trying to achieve something that's easy for any brand of a model to be able to get, and just try to keep it more even for each kind of card, if you can get what I'm saying. So anyway, let's start with the Gaming X Trio from MSI. This is their one of their slides. I will say this is an extremely quiet card. At 65% fan speed and up, it's certainly audible, but with it at auto fan speed and an overclock, I have not seen it go over 45%, which you just cannot hear at all. And then there's the overclock that I put on this card, plus 150 on the core, keeps it around 2065. Bounces around a little bit, but average is around 2065. Temperature doesn't go over 70, and then the memory did plus 400, which doubled, is 19.8, and that's mega transfers a second. Memory isn't really megahertz per second, and that's something you can either go to BuildZoid, actually hardcore overclocking, and get his explanation on it, or I could maybe do a video on it if you really want. But the technical term for memory at its highest rated speed should be mega transfers a second. So here's the card in my test bench, just showing off the RGB. It does have a very bright RGB bar that will turn some of you off, but some of you who like a lot of RGB, it's a lot. I like it when set to certain kind of settings. It has a, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, looks like 6 LEDs in there. And the bar diffuses them, so they blend together pretty well, but you can certainly tell there's where each individual LED is. The MSI logo also lights up, and then on the face of the card by the fans, there's that, claw stripe or whatever you want to call it, if you were to do a vertical mount. So here's full system specs. The 10850K, 10 cores, 20 threads, 5.2 all-core when not under AVX load, 5 all-core when under AVX load. The ASUS C490A Prime motherboard. If you saw my recent video, I switched over to 2x16 gig sticks of Crucial Ballistics 3600, 16, 18, 18, 36 timings. The obviously MSI RTX 3080 Gaming X Trio, the newest NVIDIA driver 460.89 as of the time of my testing, and I have a 2TB Mushkin Pilot NVMe drive. So the first game I tested is Destiny 2. The issue with using Destiny 2 as a test is the game does not allow you to use fraps or anything else, any kind of overlay in it, to record your frame rate. The game does have its own built-in frame rate reader, but it doesn't record anything. So what I would do, or what I've been doing, is I would go to Europa, which is probably the most demanding new area in the game because of the snowstorms, and then would go to a specific public event. I forget the exact name of the area, but it's the right side of the map. It's a Vex public event, and would just keep a close eye on the frame rate that it would say. I would specifically look for the minimum and the maximum, and then a range that it stayed between. That was the best way I could come up with to do it. The reason I want to use Destiny 2 as a test is it's actually pretty demanding at its highest settings at 4K, and it's also a very popular game. It's free to play, or at least there's a free to play version, so I really wanted to have it in the tests. And then also for my testing, because I did not know or expect to get a 3080, and I started with the 2060 and the 5600 XT, the settings that I was using across each card were toned down a bit so that more mid-range cards could be tested. So now that I have a 3080, it's kind of just reaching the point where you would not realistically want to run those settings on it. So I did a fully maxed out or better settings for the 3080 specifically separately, just to see what those results would be. But I'm not going to read these numbers. I'm sure you've had enough time to look over them and can see the performance that it did. All the cards were tested at 4K with an 80% resolution scaling, using the highest in-game settings with FXAA. The only setting I turned down is depth of field to high. For some reason, going from high to highest, when you aim down sight on a gun, it just tanks the frame rate. So I kept that at high, everything else is highest. And then the bottom setting with the 3080 really has no problem. I mean, it still drops when using depth of field on highest, but it can handle it. So let's move on to the next game. Gears 5. So again, with trying to keep mid-range cards in the graph, 4K high quality preset with the high-res texture pack installed. And then for the 3080, 4K with the highest settings and the high-res texture pack. So as you can see, the 3080 is extremely close to holding a perfect 60 FPS with the highest settings at 4K. Either that's close enough, I would call it, especially if you had a variable refresh rate display, or just dropping, you know, one or two settings from the highest down to high or whatever, I'm sure would lock it above 60. World of Warcraft, why would that be on here? Well, Shadowlands is new, the game is still extremely popular, and they added ray tracing or ray trace shadows to the game. As you can see, without the ray tracing, the game is very easy to run on most hardware. Although surprisingly, at its max settings, you know, the 2060 and the 5600 XT, while it certainly could do 60 if you had a high frame rate monitor, you'd have to turn stuff down. So, World of Warcraft has gotten progressively more difficult to run as it ages. And then the 3080 with the ray trace shadows on and switching from FXAA to 4X MSIA, you know, the minimum tank's pretty good, but the average is still fine. Alright, for Apex Legends, did 4K and had to use the 6 gig texture setting because of the 2060 and the 5600 XT. Didn't really see any reason to go, you know, do a separate test any more than that because the rest of the settings are max. As you can see, there's really no problem running this game. You could pretty much lock it at a 120 FPS VSync, or, you know, hopefully just VRR at 120 or up to 144. The 3080 is pretty much perfect for that range. And again, this is at 4K, so if you're at 1440p, then would be a lot higher. But there are 120 Hz 4K displays like this television that I have. I'm sure the monitors are... I know there's a couple of really expensive ones, and I know next year there's more coming out, and I'm pretty sure a couple of them were 144 Hz. But I don't know. Alright, so GTA 5 is still very popular. For some reason, the NVIDIA cards have really bad minimum frame rates in this game. Don't know exactly why that is. What I would do is just run the built-in benchmark and then average out all the scores. But, you know, I wish the benchmark would cut off the, you know, say bottom 5% and show a more realistic number. But when it comes to the average, 3080, highest settings, max AA, you know, you can certainly lock it to 4K 60. Right, and then Fortnite, epic settings, there's a slider for the texture detail, putting it up to 75%. Made pretty much every card here playable at 4K. The 3080 at 100%, and then they added ray tracing. So I turned on ray tracing, turned on ray trace shadows, put the reflections to low, and that still just kills the frame rate on this. I did not do any DLSS testing. I will probably do that. If you guys specifically want to see a DLSS video, I'll try to get as many games as I can together with that have DLSS, and do a video on, you know, what kind of settings you can expect with the 3080 and maybe a 3060 Ti, using DLSS to increase your frame rate while having ray tracing on. If you're interested in that, let me know. But this time, I would say ray tracing is just pretty much not usable in Fortnite without DLSS. Alright, Godfall's benchmark does not show minimums. I have not played enough of the game or had time to do a, you know, custom run and record frame rate myself. So just using averages here. 4K high preset for all the cards, and then for the 3080, the epic preset, you know, 4K 60 seems pretty much good to go. And then Cyberpunk. So again, starting out with the 2060 5600 XT, my goal was to aim for 1440p, and when it says optimize settings, watch Digital Foundry's recommended settings, you know, what you could turn down to low to gain performance with minimal impact on image quality, or turn up to high to you know, gain image quality at a minimized performance hit. So that's what it is. I pretty much did, their recommendations for the settings. No ray tracing, again at 1440p, no DLSS. That's, the 3080, the 2080 Ti, 3060 Ti are all fine above 60. Last gen mid-range cards are struggling, but if you wanted a console-like experience and wanted to lock it to where the minimum doesn't go below 30, then you could, do optimized settings or even a little bit higher than that at 1440p. But the 3080, using those same optimized settings at 4K, but that's DLSS 4K, DLSS set to performance mode, wanted to figure out, using the optimized settings and ultra ray tracing, what would get me to the most playable, closest to 60 frame rate, without too much sacrifice, and that's what I came up with. For some of you, dropping down to 50 might be a problem. For me, it's not. So that's how I would play the game with a 3080. Alright, and then synthetic benchmarks. Here's superposition, 1080p extreme, which is more demanding than the preset 4K ones. So still use 1080p extreme, as that's kind of like just the standard that's used. And then 3D Mark Time Spy. I would have done more cards on the Port Royal benchmark, but I did not own it until just before getting the 3080. So as of right now, the 3080 is all I've run on Port Royal. So an interesting thing here is you can see the total score, which takes into account your processor, is pretty much the graphics card was the thing holding back the system up to the 2080 Ti, where it just pretty much was even, but the 3080 the graphics score was way more than the processor. So the 3080, at least when it comes to 3D Mark, is kind of bottlenecking the 10850K a little bit, and that's at 5.2 all core. But that's right. So that's all the testing that I have. Really like this card. Was not expecting to get it. Not entirely sure what I'm going to do with it yet. I have it open to offers right now to trade for a slightly lower end card, get some money back from it. I just work too much. Don't have enough time to play games with it and actually use it, so I don't really have a use for a $800 to $900 video card. So that's my current thought with it. So we'll see what happens. If I can get another 3060 Ti again, I'll probably do that, but I might get a 3070 just so I can do a video on the 3070 as well. But I will see what happens. I should know in a couple of days. That said, the card really is great especially if you're on a 4K display and you have the money to spend and you really want, just excellent 4K performance. Go for the 3080 and the MSI Gaming X Trio. The downsides is 3 8-pin PCIe connectors, which are not needed. It really would have been fine with 2. And the power limit bar doesn't go very far, so it is power limited when overclocking. But I have heard that you can flash the BIOS to the other card that they have. I can't remember the exact name of it at the moment, but that would increase its overclocking potential. If I were to keep the card, I would probably do that. Oh, and actually, one more thing. Let me look up that card real quick. But I want to talk about mining in just a minute. The other MSI one was... Where is it? This one, the Supreme don't know why I couldn't think of that, or Supreme, however you want to say it, the Supreme X. I guess that one has higher overclocking potential, and you could flash the BIOS potentially to that. But again, I don't know if I'm going to be keeping the card. As of right now, I'm leaning towards trading it and getting some money back. So anyway, I do mine in my off time when I'm not using the PC. The 3080 gets, this is a little bit low, but it's been getting 86 mega hash pretty much consistent, which currently is around 350-ish a day after electricity for me at 6 cents kilowatt hour. And that's at 220 watts. For some reason, I don't find making changes really affects the mining performance. It pretty much holds around 84 to 87, kind of regardless of what I put the core and the memory at. So I just drop the power limit, lock the fan to 50% because it's still quiet, and drop the core down. As you can see, where's board power? Board power around 220 watts. This says 220 watts. And at 86 megahash a second, it's the 3060 Ti, I think, is the better mining card because that gets 60 at 120 watts. And for not quite half the price, but pretty close. So I would say a couple 3060 Ti's that use one 8-pin connector would be better to mine with. So that's another reason I'm leaning towards trading for a 3060 Ti and getting some money back, and then maybe starting a mining rig down in my basement with more of those. But yeah, so I just wanted to share that little bit. If anyone knows why it's not sensitive to changing the core speed and memory speed, or something's going on there, you can let me know. The 3060 Ti had, was definitely taking effect, dropping the core and bringing the power limit, everything worked and showed as it should, and then bringing the memory up plus 1,000, or actually it was plus 1,200, because when you mine it takes away 200. But yeah, that's how I got the 3060 Ti to 60 megahash a second at 120 watts. So this is 100 watts more for only 26 megahash more. Yeah. All right, I'm rambling at this point, so I'm going to call it here. So I hope you all liked this video. Like I said, great card. I would recommend it. And that's pretty much it for me. So have a good night.